Howard Tiersky, the author of Winning Digital Customers, The Antidote to Irrelevance, which I assume you have a copy of, either a printed version like this or some form of electronic book, Kindle or Nook or Apple Books or something along those lines. And the reason I'm assuming that is because this video is in fact a supplement to the book, and it's really about diving into more detail on how do you create massive value for your customers. Just as a quick reminder, in the book we talk about the 3 patterns that the most successful digital brands are demonstrating, and that's hyper-convenience, proactive personalization, and the third, which is what this video is about, massive value shift. And massive value shift is something very simple. It means providing more for less. I used to pay $2 or $1 a minute to make a long-distance call. Now I pay nothing or a penny because I use Skype. I used to have to buy all my music at a record store, and now I pay $9 a month to Spotify. And not only can I get almost every piece of music ever created for free or for that subscription, but I can even share it with my family, right? And you can go on and on. You know, I can go on Google and instead of buying Microsoft Office, get a complete Office suite for free. When I was a kid, my parents bought a 30-volume encyclopedia set, which they still have, 1967 World Book Encyclopedia. I'll tell you a funny story about that in a sec. And that cost, I don't know how much it cost them at the time, but in today's dollars, probably more than $1,000. Wikipedia, now available online, 1,000 times more content, much more up to date, and of course, for free. I gotta tell you a quick funny story about that. I was back at my parents' house in Lincolnwood, Illinois a couple years ago, and they still have that darn 1967 World Book Encyclopedia set that they bought when I was born. I was born in '68. I think they bought it when my mom was pregnant with me. In any case, just on a lark, and of course, you know, there's some beautiful, you know, it has amazing color images and acetate overlays, really wonderful product. And of course, some content in there. If you look up Napoleon, you'll probably get a perfectly usable article. But we decided just for fun to look up computer and to see what it would say about computers. So, you know, there's a whole article about computers. There's black and white pictures of, you know, guys in the 50s with pocket protectors standing next to banks that have, you know, giant computers with light bulbs flashing and all this kind of stuff. And it's talking about the state of the art of computers and transistors and all that. And at the very end of the story, which is 10, 12 pages long in the encyclopedia, there's a phrase I'll never forget. The story ends with this. It says, computers are getting smaller and smaller every year. One day, there will be a computer small enough to fit in a single room. I love that story. Small enough to fit in a single room. Imagine the challenges that we all have of envisioning what the future will really look like. And we think someday we'll have a computer that can fit in a single room. Well, obviously we have computers now that fit in our pockets. And frankly, we have teeny tiny computers that we can put on a sticker and embed in a pallet, or increasingly little tiny ones we can swallow and will, you know, take pictures of us inside and all kinds of cool stuff. Okay, well, other than maybe adding a little bit of humorous value to this video, that story may not have been on topic, but the main point here is that today's digital winners, and just winners in general, are providing more for less. And the Wikipedia article certainly would not still contain that kind of out-of-date information. So good, look at that, I tied it back to the topic after all. So that's really it. The value equation is the value equals benefit minus cost. So what we want to do in this video is spend a few minutes and just talk about, so how do you increase the benefit to your customer, and how do you reduce the cost? And how do you do that in a sustainable way? And by sustainable, I mean, obviously you could reduce the cost right now, right? You could charge your customer 1 penny for everything, right? And boom, you've just reduced the cost, and therefore to the customer, you've massively increased the value. But how long are you going to be in business that way? You know, similarly, you can give the customer the store, you can give them all your awesome stuff and not charge them a penny more and massively increase the value. But similarly, if you do that, you're probably spending more delivering the value than you're receiving back. And that's not sustainable. And that's not largely what the companies that are successful today are doing. Some of them operate at a loss for a while, that's true. But by and large, if you look at the successful digital brands, whether that's Google or Facebook, they're generating a sizable profits, and they're doing it still by providing more for. So how do you do that? Well, let's dive in. And you know what? I want to tee up actually an exercise for you. And I'm going to tee up the exercise, but I don't want you to do it yet. I'm going to go through 5 specific categories of ways and strategies you can use to increase value in a sustainable way. I'm going to go through 5 methods for you to reduce cost in a sustainable way. And then I'm going to go through 5 methods for you to increase the benefits in a sustainable way. And then obviously together those make up value. And the exercise has 4 parts. I want you to first listen to me going through these 10 ways to increase value, 5 of which are about reducing costs and 5 of which are about increasing benefits. And then I want you to ask yourself, or if I'm hoping you're even watching this with a team of people, which would be awesome. So if you are, hey everybody. And what I want to ask you to do is answer these 4 questions. And there's a PDF on the website as well, which you can download that has an infographic of these 10 areas. And there's a slide that has these key questions on it. So if you want to print that out or put that up on a screen, that's great. And answer these 4 questions. And I want you to do it for each of the 10 areas. So it might take you a little while. It might take you a half hour or maybe even an hour. I want you to think it through, because what you're going to do is you're going to brainstorm and ideate and come up with different methods to increase the value to your customer that in a sustainable way. And by the way, one of my rules of brainstorming is don't try to come up with the right idea or the perfect idea. Just come up with ideas. You'll go through and filter them later. We talk about this in depth in the book, the process of ideation. So I'm not going to get into it in detail here, but don't worry about coming up with the one right idea. Just go through each of these areas and just generate ideas that might possibly be relevant. Because then with ideation, you want to generate everything, and then you want to go back later and pick through it and try to figure out which are the ones that are really worth pursuing. At our Innovation Loft in Manhattan, where we do lots of ideation sessions all the time, we have an expression that's printed on the wall, which is, it doesn't matter how much sand there is in the pan, only how many flecks of gold. And we didn't make that up, by the way. I picked it up somewhere along my long career. And essentially, just like in gold panning, in the old prospecting days in the 1890s in California gold rush, you dig into the river of ideas and you wind up with a bunch of muck. But in there's a couple of flecks of gold. That's what you want. And then you'll sift through it. So don't leave all the river mud at the bottom of the river and not look at it because it's not mostly gold. Just dig it all up or scoop it all up, and then you'll pick through it later. So here are the 4 questions that should seed your ideation. And again, I'm going to go through these 10 different ways to increase value. Your exercise is to go and answer these questions for each of the 10. Maybe you want to do it in a couple meetings. Maybe I want to have one meeting to just cover the first 5, focused on reducing costs, and another meeting to cover the second 5 for increasing the benefits, whatever you like to do. Here are the 4 questions. The first is, where have we successfully implemented this principle? So let me give you an example. One of the other methods to reduce the cost to a customer is via bundling, which could be combining multiple products together so that they get a better deal. And you can potentially do that in a sustainable way because you're increasing the size of your sale. And it could also be done, by the way, by bundling products from other companies. You can get another company to agree to give you their product at a low price, either because you're agreeing to buy a large quantity from them, and therefore they're willing to give it to you wholesale, so to speak, or because they want their product in a sort of sampling model to be introduced to your customer base, hoping that they'll buy more. In any case, that category, of which there are many variations, of bundling is a way of essentially lowering the cost. It lowers the cost because if the customer's thinking, well, normally I'd have to pay $50 for this and $50 for this and $50 for this, and if I buy all 3 of them from you together, it only costs me $80 instead of $150, you've lowered their cost, right? You may have increased the amount they pay in the sense of if they only bought one thing, they'd pay you $50, but now they're paying $80, but they're paying $80 instead of $150, right? So that's an example of lowering the cost. So you want to ask yourself, well, where have we applied this principle already at our company? That's the first question. Where have we successfully implemented some of these, and how did it go? What was it that we did that applied to that principle? The second question is similar, but where are our comparative or competitive companies doing this? Meaning, your direct competitor, like if you're Chase, then your Citibank is your direct competitor, for example, or comparative companies, meaning if you're an airline, a hotel chain might be a comparative company, or even a restaurant chain has aspects that are comparative and that need to attract customers on a repeating basis and provide them good service and serve food and things like that. So other companies that may not be competing for the same dollar, but you may have something to learn from. So what have we all experienced in our own lives as consumers where we'd say, oh, well, this is what another company's doing. Then the third is, okay, now what ideas might we implement at our company? That's the third question. And this is where you want to be freewheeling and not worry too much about whether they're sustainable, whether they're legal, whether they would make money, whether other division of your company would allow you to do it, whether they'd be willing to. Don't worry about all that yet. Those are important considerations. But first, just get the ideas out there. You're looking for opportunities to create value. And so you're going to go through and you're going to think about all of these different possible ideas, and you're just going to write them all down. And probably as you start to think about the things you've already done and the things that your competitors are doing, even before you get to question 3, you're going to have ideas. So you're going to want to write those down. And then the last question is, well, how could we make those sustainable? So that's when you're starting to then go back to those ideas and saying, okay, which of these ideas might really be sustainable? I already alluded earlier to the idea that if I sell a water filtration system, and I have an idea to get a company that makes, I don't know, let's say ice makers. And I want to offer a bundle where if you buy my water filter, you also get an in-home ice maker, and I want to create a great price for that, what would be some strategies where I could do that and I could still, make money? For example, maybe I don't even really need to make money on the ice maker if that's made by another company. I just need to make money on the water filtration system. And so I can actually include that because I'm going to buy 1,000 of them, as I said before. So it's just a matter of then going through and brainstorming what would be some tactics to make it sustainable. Because in the end, that's what we're looking for. Sustainable ways to increase value. But sometimes first you have to come up with a way to increase value. That's round one of brainstorming without being able to figure out how it could be sustainable. And then say, now, customers would like that, but how would we make that sustainable? And there's a lot of ways. Is it through an advertising model? Is it through what we're going to talk about? A whole bunch of different models right now. So that's the exercise. I will briefly restate that at the end as well, because I'm now going to go through the 5 key ways to reduce cost and the 5 key ways to increase benefits. And by the way, these are not the only ways. So as you're going through this exercise, you may realize that there's other ways, 6, 7, and 8 more ways to increase cost, reduce cost, or increase value. That is absolutely fine. Go ahead and write those ideas down. Just consider this set of 10 methods to increase value, 5 reducing cost, 5 increasing benefits, as a kind of a springboard for ideation. So the first is to just charge less. Just lower the cost. Now, that can be a path to sort of a downward spiral of competition, and I think a lot of folks in the digital realm today have this problem because it's so easy to cost compare. Location doesn't matter, of course, in the digital world, and so customers can be inclined to just go with who's ever the least expensive, and if you just keep competing, lowering your prices, then you sort of drive your entire industry out of profitability. So you have to be careful about that. However, there definitely are situations where you may discover that if you experiment with a completely different and lower price point, you may actually grow the business, especially when you have a digital product where you may not have a very high degree of cost of goods sold. If you have a platform and you're selling it for $100 a month, you may discover that if you sold it for $70 a month, you'd double your customers and that you'd actually be more profitable. So it's kind of a basic one to start with, but to just be willing to experiment with ways of charging less. By the way, another way of charging less is to look to charge less only under certain circumstances or in certain variations of your product. For example, if you're selling like a CRM, online CRM system, you may have a product that's $100 a month. Maybe you could create a more limited version of that product that you could sell for $10 a month, a massively different price point, but that you believe that most of the customers who pay you $100 wouldn't want it because it doesn't contain enough features, but there might be a whole other market that might want a product like that. That's another way of charging less. So there's many different variations on how you can charge less. Another is to create another price point that's only for students or only for not-for-profits, or target only certain businesses that you believe would have tremendous growth potential and offer them exclusive kind of coupon codes that are only for their business to get a lower price. Of course, some of these are not highly original ideas I'm offering you. I'm just really trying to highlight this is one category, and it's important to brainstorm because sometimes we get locked into thinking, well, this is how we do business. And an exercise like this is an opportunity to step back and go, well, wait a minute, there are ways we could charge less if we wanted to and still have it be sustainable, right? So I'm sort of in combination trying to talk about some ideas about different variations on charging less, but also starting to think about, well, how does that become sustainable so it's not just a race to the bottom in terms of price. Number 2 is to change the payment model. So we've seen a ton of this as the world has become more and more digitally centric. For example, we've seen a huge push towards different types of subscription models. And we've seen other businesses, let me give you a few examples. So one example is take something like, an Apple Music, right? Where they shift from selling individual tracks at 99 cents each to just shifting to a monthly subscription model. And very often subscription models can make money because people sometimes think they'll use something more than they will. So someone might actually wind up paying Apple more money in a year under the subscription model than they would if they just bought the tracks for 99 cents each. And then they have to keep paying year after year, right? Because they don't keep the rights to those tracks, even though they don't necessarily listen to more music. Or even if they listen to a little more music, Apple may very well still come out ahead on that subscription model. And of course, there are some people who maybe wouldn't be attracted to the value proposition of buying tracks for 99 cents and owning them, but thinks the subscription model seems like a great value. So remember that I mentioned earlier this idea of perception, the actual value versus the perception. Sometimes when you increase the perceived value of something, it's just as effective as increasing the actual value. And subscriptions can be an example of that because people feel they have the freedom, in the case of a all-you-can-eat type subscription like a Netflix or Hulu, to do watch as much as they want. And as a result, they might be happy to pay more. And whether they actually watch more or not, probably will vary by customer. But in aggregate, it's possible that they won't. So that's essentially changing your payment model. Another example of changing your payment model is moving to an advertising model. Certainly if we see something like Google Mail, there was a time, I mean, now there are so many free email, but there was a time when most people paid AOL or a company like that for their email, or was included as a bundle with their, say, cable modem in their home, but it wasn't necessarily easy to find for free. And then services like Hotmail and Google Mail came out, offering a great value to the customer because they didn't have to pay anything for mail. But of course there was advertising, and shifting from a model where the customer's paying you directly to a model where you're taking advertising is another example of changing payment models. You're being paid, but you're being paid by someone else. And now of course we see models going the other way as well, because traditional television is monetized that way through advertising. But we see that there's other customers who prefer to pay a monthly subscription price and then not have to have ads in their television program, and then they wind up signing up for something like Netflix. At least that's one reason. So change doesn't always go in one direction, but experimenting with the question of, are there customers for whom we can create either greater value or greater perceived value by changing payment models or diversifying payment models? For example, in Apple's case, they didn't get rid of the ability to simply pay 99 cents for one track of music and have it for the rest of your life. You can still do that, but they layered on a subscription model. And so for some customers, just like with the hamburger example, for some customers, McDonald's is a better value proposition. For some, it's the high-end steakhouse hamburger. And similarly with Apple, for some, they perceive that the 99 cents per track model is better. And for some, they perceive that whatever it is, a $20 a month subscription model to all the music is better. And so that's fine. You're changing or you're diversifying payment models. So again, that may not be the example that you want for your company, but the goal of the exercise is, as you go through each of these things, you want to be saying to yourself, well, how could we change our payment models? What are different ways that we could charge the customer or charge somebody else in such a way that we would create more value for the customer, but it would still be sustainable? Another is reduce effort for the customer. Now you might think, well, what does that have to do with cost? Because we're talking about 5 ways to reduce cost. Well, customers don't only think of cost in terms of the dollars that they pay you, or euros, or wherever you may be watching this video from, but also in terms of the effort they have to expend. So if you look at someone like Uber, they did take dollars out. I find in most municipalities, and Uber is cheaper than, say, a local taxi. But in addition to that, it's just easier. I can just push a button on my phone and a car pulls up and I know exactly when it's coming, rather than having to go out on the street, stick my arm out. At least that's how we do it in New York City. Hail a taxi, not know if I'll find one, fight other people for the taxi, all those types of things. So they've taken cost out, but also taken effort out. So any opportunity you have to reduce effort is an opportunity to essentially reduce the perceived cost the customer has. Another example would be Amazon. They have the Alexa now, right? So if I want to reorder something, let's say we get our, oatmeal from from Amazon, and I realize I'm out of oatmeal, I can just say to my Alexa, which happens to be in my kitchen, Alexa, let me make sure she's not around because she's going to do it if I say this. No, Alexa's in the other room. I think I'm safe. If I say, Alexa, reorder oatmeal, I'm done. And oatmeal is going to arrive in the next couple days. So, they've taken, and maybe that it's a dollar more than I pay at the supermarket. I don't even know. To be honest, I haven't even checked, because that increase in convenience reduces the cost to me to get the oatmeal, because I don't have to drive to the store or even deal with going on Instacart and ordering it. So reducing effort. And the last one is the one I mentioned earlier, is to bundle other savings. So another example would be somebody like AAA. AAA charges you, AAA is of course a subscription product, right? AAA, for anyone who doesn't know what I mean, is, Automobile Club of America, Automobile Association of America, I guess that's why it's AAA, one of our clients, by the way. Great organization, and it's a subscription because you get an annual fee, and then anytime your car breaks down, they will come and save you. So that's great. You don't have to think about paying it when it happens. You just pay it, and they're there when you need them. Great company. But you get other benefits as well. For example, you get travel savings. So if you show your AAA card at most hotels, they'll give you 10 or 15% off of your hotel bill. Well, that may turn out to be worth more than the cost of your AAA membership. You may pay $100 a year for AAA membership, but if you stay in hotels 5, 10, 15 nights a year, you may actually save more money off those hotel bills. So the net cost to you isn't $100, it's zero, because of the additional savings that you get. So if you can find ways, and AAA is not paying those hotels for that benefit. See, that's what makes it sustainable. AAA is actually promoting those hotels and helping those hotels, and in some cases they actually receive money from those hotels in exchange for promoting them, but to the member, that's an additional value. So that's another example of a way that you can create a bundle. And I mentioned some other examples earlier. Obviously there's companies that combine auto and home insurance together and give you a better price. Anytime you're bundling your own products together, you can very often give the customer a better discount as well. Again, you're not necessarily lowering the total cost when you do that, which was our first category, because the customer may actually pay more, but you're lowering the cost in terms of the compared to the benefits. So it's funny. This is an example of one where even though this is the lower in cost category, in a sense you're raising the costs, but you're increasing the benefits on the other side so much that it's perceived as a lower cost. Okay, so those are our 5 methods of lowering cost. And of course there are others, but those are 5 we wanted to summarize here. And so this might be a good time to do the lowering cost exercise and just go back and answer those 5 questions for yourself. Where have we successfully implemented some of these? You may have had sales where you lowered your cost, and what happened? How well does it work for you? Or examples where you changed a payment model. Where did you do it? Where are your competitors doing it? Where are other comparative companies doing it? Then let's generate some ideas for how you could apply these. You may wind up throwing 90% of those ideas away. That's totally fine. Just get them out there. You want to explore the universe of the possible, and then later you'll assess them. And then ultimately, for those ideas, ask yourselves, do we have ideas to make them more sustainable? What kind of deals could we make? How could we structure these things so that we wind up whole as a company and hopefully also create a better value proposition? So if you want to, you can do those 5 and then come back and we'll talk about the ways of increasing value. So feel free to pause this and do that, but I will keep going because in addition we have 5 ways of increasing the value, increasing the benefits, meaning the value is the benefits minus the cost. So these are 5 ways of increasing the benefits to the customer that essentially from which you subtract the cost to determine the ultimate value. So the first is, remember our first cost benefit was just charge less, right? Seems simple, but of course it's still worth brainstorming on it because there are many ways to charge less, and it might turn out that one of them is a really unique and creative idea, even though the category itself sounds kind of obvious. So the first category here is also kind of obvious. Offer more stuff. Just give the customer more for their money. Charge them the same, give them more stuff. But, again, how do you do that sustainably, right? It's easy to say, just give them more. Well, let me give you some examples. Dropbox, for example, gives you a certain amount of storage space for your monthly subscription. But they regularly increase the amount of storage that they're able to give you. Now, how do they do that? Well, for one thing, some of their costs are dropping. So they're figuring out how to use scale to lower their costs so they can give you more for your money. But in addition, because what they're offering you is a potential ceiling, it's not necessarily something you're going to use. What Dropbox finds is that most people don't use all the space that they offer them. So if you're using 80 gigabytes of your 100 gigabyte Dropbox, and your renewal is coming up, and Dropbox says, hey, good news, if you renew with us, we're going to up you from 100 gigabytes to 200 gigabytes. You still might only use 90 gigabytes, right? So that increase, offering you more stuff, may be something that you don't actually wind up using. A similar example, my gym, I'm sure is very worried I'm going to cancel during COVID because they've been closed for the last 5 months. So, of course, they've offered to extend my gym membership by the number of months they've been closed. I mean, that's not really anything special. You'd kind of assume that. But now they've also come back to me and said, hey, I can bring a guest, which wasn't something I had on my gym membership before, for the next 6 months for free as well. So they're offering me something more. Now, am I going to do it? Am I going to bring a guest? Maybe. I might bring my son once or twice, but it's probably not going to cost them anything or cost them very much. And by the way, if I bring a guest and they love it, and 6 months later, they may become a new customer. So they may come out ahead on something like bring a guest anyway. So there's many ways to offer your customer more stuff that don't have to cost you a lot. Certainly content is another great way. Content, media, if 2 companies sell webcams and they both cost $100 and they're both comparable quality, but one comes with a video course on how to make the most of your webcam and how to shoot using your webcam to get the best possible videos, that may be perceived as more value. What is your actual cost to create that course? It may be only a few $1,000s. And what is your cost to distribute that course? Near zero, right? Because you could just put it up on a website they have to use a code from the package or something. Well, that's how this book is, right? We created this website to add more value to the book, but it doesn't cost us, we have to print the book, right? We have to print this, we have to ship it to places, we have costs associated with this physical item, unless of course you have the Kindle book, which we can charge less for, right? If you take the Kindle book, we're able to charge you less because we don't have all the costs associated with the physical book. But if you're like me, you like physical books, well, that's fine, but you need to pay a little more because the paper, the printing, et cetera, et cetera. But to give you these additional videos, it only costs the time it takes to shoot them and edit them and to host them, which is relatively low. So we can add a lot more value to the book without adding the same kind of cost. So look at ways to offer more stuff. That's the first category. And again, in Reminder, you're going to brainstorm for each of these categories and say, what might we do that customers would love in this area that would, in this case, add more benefits, and how would we do that sustainably? Okay, The next is to add features. Now that might sound similar to offer more stuff, but adding features is really, particularly for things like software products, saying, well, how could we make what you're actually already getting just more useful to you? Credit cards do this all the time, for example. All of a sudden I'll get a notification from Chase saying, hey, we just added a new thing. You're going to get double points on gas for the next 3 months. Or, you're going to get a 5% discount at Staples for the next month or whatever, right? So they're constantly adding new bonuses, new features, new things that benefit me, which I may or may not take advantage of, but they're constantly pointing out how they're actually improving the thing that I already bought, which of course is valuable if I already have the product. But if I don't have the product, all of a sudden American Express came out with a thing last year that their platinum cards, which cost I think $600 a year, we're now going to give you special deals with Uber. And while I don't know the exact financial arrangement between American Express and Uber, from knowing that industry, I know that usually the credit card companies are looking to pay as little as possible. Meaning, for someone like Uber, they're hoping they're going to attract more business as a result of this, and not necessarily expecting American Express to reimburse them the full value of what they're actually discounting for American Express customers. So these are ways you can add features to an existing product. And obviously, if you have a software product or a cloud-based product, then this is very obvious. You're just making the product better and better and better as a way of adding more benefits to the customer. Straightforward. But again, in your situation, what are the kinds of features that you could add, and how do you do that sustainably, right? The next is increase shareability. How do you make the thing that the person bought usable by more people? So I think I alluded to this earlier, but a lot of digital media subscriptions now have this, whether it's Hulu or Netflix or Spotify, where you can buy a subscription product, but then you can invite other people in your family to also use it on your same subscription without paying more. Apple has made it so that if you have a family and every accounts are linked together as a family, if I buy an app for $2, other members of my family can use it without having to pay additionally for it. So it works differently for different products. Obviously, it's harder to do it for certain kind of physical products. Physical products are inherently shareable. I can buy a cup and give it to someone else and they can share it. I'm not sure exactly how you make a cup more shareable, which is an example, of course, of how. But actually, it's funny, I just said that, but let me give you an example. I have a scale in my bathroom which remembers your weight. And then it shows you every time you get, this is kind of a depressing feature, I have to admit, but anyway, it's a selling feature. It's a reason to buy the product. Once you have the product, you may wish it wouldn't remember what your last weight was and tell you that you've gained 3/4 of a pound. But it remembers your weight, but it's designed to be used by multiple people. So when you first get on, it asks who's it weighing, me or my wife or whatever else, and then it tells me how much I've increased or decreased. Likewise, my wife, and obviously it knows what her weight was. So this is just a product that's designed to be shareable. So if we want to have a scale that remembers our weight, we don't each need our own separate scale that remembers our weight. We can use one scale. So there's an example of how you can apply that to a physical product. And obviously, another examples would be some of the media examples that I talked about before. The fourth is to increase the durability or longevity of a product. For some physical products, it's just a matter of making sure the product, doesn't break and lasts longer, convincing somebody that made a more robust product that they're going to get more benefit from because they're not going to have to replace it as soon. Sometimes you can not even change the product, but just give a better warranty. And by giving a better warranty, you essentially improve the longevity of the product, at least in perception, because the customer thinks, oh, well, normally something like this, I'm buying a small consumer electronics item or something, and normally I figure something like this is probably going to break within a few years, but if you're going to give me a 5-year warranty, hey, I'm going to be able to make sure that even if it does break, I'm getting the 5 years of benefit because you're going to replace it. In fact, the likelihood of those types of warranties actually being redeemed is relatively low because most people, by the time something breaks 2 years later, have forgotten about the warranty and don't have the receipt anymore, etc. So from a sustainability perspective, you can very often make those types of offers without necessarily having massive cost associated with it. And of course, when you have a software product or digital product, some kind of, or even a consumer electronics item, some type of future proofing can also increase the longevity. For example, if you make sure people realize that your new computer laptop that you're selling contains the very latest USB ports or is already configurable for 5G networking when it comes out, or you're essentially making sure people know that it's been designed with future technologies in mind, or that it is upgradable. And there are a variety of different types of products that are upgradable, either just by directly connecting to the internet, or if I buy a Sirius XM radio, it can connect to the internet and download software upgrades to add new features over time, or obviously add new channels. If I buy a Wi-Fi router for my home, I've had some that have been advertised to say, hey, this router complies with the current standard, but it's also upgradable. So when the new standard comes out, you'll just have to download an update and your Wi-Fi router will be good to go for the new, even faster standard. So those are ways of making sure your product has that kind of durability or longevity. And it's really a matter of not only of both designing your product that way, but also making sure that's part of your marketing message, right? Because when someone's buying your product, and this is really an important point across all of the benefits we're talking about here, they're going to do a mental calculation about what their perceived value is. Benefits minus cost. If there are benefits they don't know about, they may be inherent to your product, but they're not going to factor them into the calculation. Now, if they buy the product and they experience it, then their level of satisfaction will be higher because they receive those benefits. But if they just are trying to decide whether to buy your product, you have to make sure they know about those benefits in order to have it included in the calculation they're doing in their mind to see whether your value is good enough, so to speak. Going back to our McDonald's example before, one of the things that people probably consider a negative for McDonald's food and have for a long time, and I do as well, is that they believe that it is unhealthy. So McDonald's has done a lot recently to try to provide healthy alternatives and to convince people that, I don't know all the details, but, their beef is farm raised or their chicken is antibiotic free or whatever else, to at least create some awareness of at least some more health-minded benefits. And certainly I'm not trying to suggest that their food is healthy, but what they're really trying to do is make sure that they're doing the best they can to communicate to you the aspects of the food that is healthy to try to create the perception of that value. Okay, back to this list. So the last item, the number 10, right, which is the fifth and final method of increasing benefits. Again, not really the final because you could probably come up with 10 more, but the final in our list in our video today is add flexibility. So if your customers can use your product in more different ways, then they can get more value from it, right? So for example, the ultimate example would be something like an iPhone, right? I mean, what is an iPhone? Well, it's a phone, but it's your email, but what else can it do? It's a compass, it's a calculator, it's a mirror, it's a camera, it's a currency converter, it's a presentation tool, it's a drawing tablet, right? I mean, how many separate things are combined together into what the iPhone can do, or any smartphone for that matter. So it's the ultimate example of a device, but by adding more flexibility, it's not even that they've added those features, right? Because a lot of those capabilities aren't provided with the phone, but because I can install software, I have this product that allows me to do so many different things. So there are a lot of ways to make products that are more flexible and can be used in different ways. Given how long we've been going, I'll pause there, but I'll just say, take the time for each of these benefits and consider what are things we could do to make our products more flexible, more usable, different way. Another non-digital example of this would be something like a Swiss Army knife, right? Here's a company that initially was selling a knife. So how many things can you use a knife for? I mean, a lot of things, right? But, can you use a knife to open a bottle? Probably not very well. Can you use a knife to open a bottle of wine? Not really. Can you use a knife to cut your fingernails? I wouldn't recommend it, right? But now, look at a Swiss Army knife. I remember when I was a kid, man, having a Swiss Army knife with all those little things that would go out was my ultimate dream. Now they sell a Swiss Army knife that can do 20 different things. And so that's an example of adding more and more to your product. Now, of course, it can become ridiculous, right? Some of those Swiss Army knives are so thick you can't put them in your pocket. But adding more and more capabilities to your product so that you ultimately can deliver more flexibility for the same cost or a similar cost is our 10th and our final way of creating more value. So anyway, hope this has been useful. The next step, if you haven't done it yet, is to brainstorm through those key questions for each category. Where have we successfully implemented this way of increasing benefits? Where are competitive or comparative companies doing this, and how's that gone for them? What specific ideas do we have to make our product more flexible or more shareable or whatever it is? And then how do we do that in a sustainable way? If we add too much to the Swiss Army knife, it might cause the production cost to increase so much that we can't charge enough for it. It doesn't make sense. Okay, well, is there another way? What would that other way be? So that's it. Those are your 10 ways. That is your exercise. I challenge you to go do that. If you have any questions, you can post that on this chapter section of the website, and we'll be happy to look for that and answer them. Have fun with this exercise. That's the key, right? You dive into something like this, have fun, enjoy yourself, be wild, be wacky, come up with unexpected ideas. You might just discover the one thing that's going to drive 25% of your company's growth over the next 5 years or even more. So good luck with it. Enjoy.